apply for a new job, go to a job interview, all of those things. We've got to, again, get that bigger self that says, I really want to be doing this, and of course, and agree, of course I'm going to be anxious and nervous about this, step forward anyway. On the backside, I have a beautiful video about this with a little kid that I got on YouTube. On the backside, it's not so bad, but it's the anticipatory anxiety that gets us going. I have this video of this little 11-year-old girl doing a 60-meter jump, ski jump for the first time, and it just takes us through her with her little helmet cam on and all her nervousness and her talking herself into doing it. And then she does it, and she gets to the end of it with her other friend. She's going, 60 meters is nothing now, right? Just one single jump, and she knows, I got it. But if she allowed that uncertainty to win over, she would have stepped off that ramp and never taken the jump. I'm sure she's having a great time now.
It's about being brave, and you're right. The concepts that you're talking about do make so much sense. You do have to be willing to take that first step, and sometimes, now the motivation to take that first step, is that often innate, or does that come from family or friends? Where does that come from for most people?
Well, I think it's a mix of all of that, but when you use the word motivation, that's exactly where we want to start, which is, do I have an outcome picture? Do I want, if I'm afraid to fly, do I want to be able to fly to Philadelphia to the family wedding badly enough that I'm willing to go through what it takes to learn to fly more comfortably? So we've got to have that outcome picture and have that pull us forward. Standing rawly facing a threatening situation is just terribly uncomfortable. I want to have a future pull. I want to have something that takes me through that experience with more strength, because on the other side, there's something bigger than my fear that I would like. And that I think, however people get motivation in the moment, that's what we want to develop to make sure I've got something that drives me forward.
One of the things that I think is and I'm going to take this personal for a moment. I remember in my youth when I would have to stand in front of the class to say book reports, as we all did. Everybody listening to this radio show had to do that at some point in your life. It was terrifying for me to stand in front of the class, because you don't want to look like a moron and say the wrong thing and have people saying, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and have them laugh. But again, I remember there was a point in my life where I decided I'm going to raise my hand and say, I'm going first. Because after you go first, you're done. You can then just relax and watch everybody. And that's the point where we get to the point where being anxious and worried, trying to relax is sort of a concept that is really, really hard to learn, isn't it?
Well, yes, and I think it's unnecessary. So many people these days are teaching relaxation skills and so forth, and, it's great to have those skills. But, if you're sitting out there in the classroom and thinking, okay, I've got to get up, I'm going to raise my hand now, but first I have to relax, good luck with that. You would call that arousal incongruence. I have to now change my physiology so that from being anxious and nervous to being calm before I take my action, that is just too difficult of an expectation. It's much easier to do something which I would call arousal incongruent. I can be anxious, but I'm going to raise my hand and go first, because once I've done it, it'll be done, and I can sit back and watch the other kids and see who's nervous. Getting that motivation, as you are talking about it, that's what pushes you through without having to calm down. The same with test anxiety. It's fine to be anxious when you're taking a test. Where people go wrong is, they blank out on question one, and then they spin out. They go, oh my God, if I fail this test, then I'm going to fail the class, then I'm going to, and they escalate. Instead, what you need to do is go, well, I have no idea the answer to that question. Let's go to question two. Stay focused, even though you're anxious. That's the biggest skill, learning what to focus on.
Okay.
And that is such a skill, because as you say, that we, the average adult today, has so many things going on, so many tasks. Everyone's doing 4 things at once, and as you say, the average human mind can only handle about four things at once. And so trying to balance all that is so tough. So our to-do list gets longer and longer, and it never seems to end. So it's not hard to complain about that, obviously.
Yeah, but some of this stuff is difficult, but it's not complex.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from the South. We can't think complexly. The model that we're using is relatively simple. It's hard, but you don't have to learn a whole bunch of steps. Just the stuff you and I are talking about already are kind of guidelines, little tips around what you need to do. And if you can just, pick up on some of those and then run with them, you get to discover. And that's really what when I'm working with my clients, it's I have to persuade them to try something because their fear is so big. I've got to get big, as big as the fear. And then, I'm a cognitive psychologist, so that means we do behavioral experiments to test out belief systems. So if I can get them to do the experiment, once they've had the experience, now they own the skill, So we can just get them to do it once, just like that 11-year-old girl taking the ski jump. Once she got the courage to do it and said 1, 2, 3, go, at the end of the jump, she could say, I got this, right? That's where we're going for. Not complex, just difficult.
And one of the things that I enjoyed from going through the book is the range of sources: firefighters, fitness instructors, Sir Isaac Newton, Muhammad Ali. All these folks have had various things that they had to overcome, and they've just had to go out and do it, haven't they?
They had, and also, you say Muhammad Ali.
Mm-hmm.
Muhammad Ali was cunning. If you know the Rumble in the Jungle, his fight that he had with George Foreman. Foreman was a huge man, the biggest puncher in all of boxing at that time. But Ali was very clever. He did, as you may remember, rope-a-dope.
Right.
He just went over there and let Foreman beat him up as he protected his body until Foreman, while Foreman was blasting at him, Ali was whispering in his ear, "Is that all you got, George? They told me you could punch." So he made him so furious by round 8, Foreman was exhausted, and Ali knocked him out. So there's, nice cunning moves we can make. Michael Phelps, the tremendous Olympic swimmer. He worked out 365 days a year in that first Olympics. Before that first Olympics, he knew that other guys were working hard. His coach, Bowman, would do things like, Phelps forgot his goggles, and the coach didn't bring them with him, so he had to swim without his goggles. Well, once he set the record in 100-meter butterfly because he had a crack in his goggles, and he could swim through that because he had been there, done that. And that's a lot of what we want to be doing with people. Let me stick my neck out. Let me try this. Let me practice a bit. The more I do it, the stronger I'll get. I'm going to get there in the end. You really do have to have some kind of self-talk here.
It is so important because, as you discussed here, your life is only your life. You only have one life, and time is fleeting and short and all that. You don't want to waste a moment. So taking a risk and trying new things is so vital, isn't it?
It is, and you have to sacrifice comfort. And you have to sacrifice certainty. I love certainty. Ask my wife. I like to be right. But when you're trying something new, you have to be willing to be uncertain and uncomfortable. If you're willing to take those steps, then you've got so much open to you at that point.
My guest is Reed Wilson. The book is Stopping the Noise in Your Head, The New Way to Overcome Anxiety and Worry. And Reed Wilson is a PhD, international expert on the treatment of anxiety disorders with books published in 9 languages. This is tuned in from Mount Wilson FM Broadcasters and Global Jazz Incorporated. Doctor, as we talk about these various things related to making yourself uncomfortable for the sake of bettering yourself, When you first began doing this work, were these concepts sort of strange to you, even at the start?
Well, essentially, I started back in the 70s,
Okay.
and the media was doing stories about what they called agoraphobia,
Okay.
panic attacks, women who lived in their houses and never left, and people started coming through our doors by the droves, and nobody knew what to do with them. Well, my experience, my training had been in chronic pain, so I already knew how to do relaxation training, biofeedback, hypnosis, and so forth, and I had a leg up on a lot of people, and then I started studying that whole area, and then I found out, relaxation itself is insufficient. So, but it's always been a puzzle to me, and that's what's fun about, for me, that's what I like, what don't I understand yet? Let me figure it out. Many of my colleagues see all kinds of problems every day. I see one thing, and that's anxiety. I like to drill down instead of do broad things, and I think that helps me figure out things that, I never would have figured out if I was seeing one of everything in my practice.
In your book, you describe specific tasks to win over some of these nasty worries, as they are referred to. Speak about those for a moment.
Well, we'll go back to the fear of flying, perhaps,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and be really a nasty. People they get afraid that the plane's gonna, they don't want to fly because the plane may crash. Well,
Right.
I designed the fear of flying program for American Airlines, and so we did, 2-day treatment groups for people to get over the fear of flying. And I can remember being in one class, and I was teaching them, the statistics are totally on our side.
Mm-hmm.
I say, look, you have to fly every single day of your life for 26,000 years before your number would be up with probability, and this young man raised his hand. He said, yeah, I get that, Doc, but what about the guy next to me? What if his number was up? And so, the statistics don't matter to so many people because they're thinking in possibility instead of probability. And that's where we get derailed. It's, there's so little likelihood, basically no one dies on a plane regarding probability, but when you focus on yes, but it does happen and how horrible it would be, then you get derailed. So part of when we look at some of these more difficult, painful things like fear of flying and on a plane, you have to wrap your mind around it's an illusion. My mind goes to this possibility, and I need to recognize that as a normal, natural function. When you read about, some terrible events with someone with a gun doing terrible things to people, and then you hear a car backfire the next day, you jump as though it's a gun, and then you have to recognize why that happens. I live in the country, and my individual clients come to see me in the country, and occasionally you might see a snake on my sidewalk. Well, and you'll jump and squeal like a little child if you're anything like me, but then the